So we have a Patreon listener question. Once again, if you are interested in being part of the Transformers Slag Patreon, be sure to check down below in the Patreon link. And there's all kinds of cool stuff. You could join us on the Discord. You could ask a whole bunch of Patreon questions that are fleshed out here out on the podcast as best as I could with my knowledge. We have all kinds of little gifts and stuff that I might send you in the mail. A whole bunch of people got a cool bunch of Shafter or Rector trading cards in the mail exclusive to TFCon back in the day, so I hope you guys enjoyed that at our $5 tier level. And we have a new $5 tier person that has joined us for the Patreon. His name is Brett B, and he has to ask us, hey, Protoman, love the podcast. I love listening. I have a listener question. I have been collecting Transformers since 2007, and 13 years later, and I'm starting to run out of space. I live in a small apartment and try to keep my collection, as well as my other Transformer-related toy lines and toy lines that I collect on the side, all in one small room, but it's starting to become a bit of a space issue. Any advice? Thank you for the amazing podcast, Brett B. P.S. I'm surprised people still do P.S. I think that's just a letter thing, no? P.S. Who is your least favorite Autobot? Okay, actually, you know what? We'll let the listeners answer that one too. Who is your least favorite Autobot? That's a tough one for me. I've never really had a least... I'll answer that one first because it's the short one. I never really had a least favorite Autobot. It's more just, you have ones that are just kind of boring, because they just didn't have a lot of stuff going on, so I don't really have hate for them or something. But I do have a least favorite Maximal. I mean, I never was a fan of Night Scream. I hate the design, I hate the character, I hate his toy. He has probably one of the worst mainline Beast Machines toys ever made, and Beast Machines was a pretty rough line to begin with. Fragile, oversized, and not very good. His McDonald's one is way better, and that's not saying much. So I definitely have to say Night Scream. But Autobot, I'd have to get back to you on that one. I don't know. That's a tough one. Again, I like the Autobots. There's a lot of cool characters, and even ones that, are boring or never had lines, I'm pretty sure they have some kind of redeeming quality. And I don't know, but I'll give you Night Scream with the Maximal side of it. I guess we'll go to the Beast Wars side of it. But Autobot, I don't know. People give their answers of who you think your least favorite Autobot is. We'll give a little more out for that one in the comments. But the second part of his question, which is dealing with space. I've gone through this many times personally in my life, but how I solved it was one that I don't expect a lot of people to do, which is just buying a new house. When it comes to space with Transformers, I've been actively collecting Transformers since, I want to say, 1995. I had Transformers before then, but, I don't really call myself a collector when I was a child. Beast Wars came around in 95, 96. I was going into high school at age 13. So that's when I think I really started, self-identifying as a toy collector, and that's when I really started going out of my way to find vintage Transformer product at garage sales and flea markets and conventions at age 13 back in 95, 96. So I like to say that I really started focusing on toy collecting around then. And during that span of time, I've amassed a lot, not just of Transformers. People who know me really well, I collect a lot of different toy lines. Transformers just is the biggest bulk of it in my house. And space has always been an issue. When I used to live with my parents, it was, my dad was a toy collector also, so it was kind of this war of who's going to take over 90% of the basement. And it was a difficult thing, to the point that I had to move out just to continue my collection, because I started finding myself buying stuff and it going straight into storage because it had nowhere to go. So what are tips that one could use to make best of the space? Number one tip, and it sounds so simple, but a lot of people make this mistake, and that's get rid of packaging. Don't keep packaging. I'm going to say this right now. Unless it's a masterpiece, like a Japanese product, a rare G1 product, something vintage, 90% of packaging you don't need to keep. When you open your brand new Earthrise figure, unless you're really in love with that box art, there's no reason really to keep it anymore. I mean, they don't do tech specs on the back anymore. There's no like cut out and clip, kind of situation here. In the box art, I mean, it's hit or miss. You like it or you don't like it. But the way that I see it is recycle that stuff. Put it back to the earth from which it came, as cheesy as that sounds. And that saves a lot of space, because when you really think about it, you open up a deluxe figure, and that deluxe figure goes on the shelf and it takes space. But then you take that box and then you put that into storage, or you like put it in a box that's going to take space in your room. Recycle it. Takes space. It takes space, and it's such a simple answer, but it really will solve a lot in terms of your issue in terms of space. Now, that's an easy answer. Some people, they do already get rid of their boxes, and they still don't have space. What's the second one? Well, it's kind of how I've always chose to display my collection, which is never waste a wall. And what I mean by that is, if you're going to build a shelving unit, if you're going to build some kind of thing that's going to hold your collection, make sure that that wall space that you are going to be using, make sure that the shelving itself is very deep. Some people, they buy like a Billy from IKEA, which has, man, I want to say it's 12 inches deep. Well, giggity. It's 12 inches deep at most. And that's okay, I guess. But even the standard DTOF is at least 13 to 15. And then, you could even buy like, bigger wall units that you could find at like a Craigslist that could be even deeper. And you want something that is deep as possible, because you're wasting the wall regardless. It's all about maximizing your surface area. So if you use an entire wall unit from top to bottom, your whole 10-foot, 12-foot roof to ceiling, ground to ceiling, make sure you just have deep shelving, and then you have maximum space. Now, obviously if it's deep shelving, sometimes some figures are going to be hidden, and then you could buy risers and it makes it look nicer. You could buy LED strips from Walmart and you could light up that deep shelving, so if the light doesn't penetrate all the way to the back. There's all kinds of tricks. Anyone who's seen my collections, it uses that. My shelving, for my collection, I think they gotta be at least 26 to 30 inches deep, and they hold a lot. I could hold entire lines from start to finish, no problem. And I'm talking from a completist nature. So deep shelving is a big one. I learned that from my dad with his collecting of die-cast cars and stuff. He's like, don't waste a wall. Don't waste a wall, because when he first started doing his displays for his die-cast, he just had like the one car in this like 2-inch slot on the wall, and it was such a waste. And then he started building other displays, and he realized, these definitely are much better and better for the long term, because you never know when this hobby's going to end. You never know when you're going to stop collecting. You never know when you reach that point where you feel you've gotten everything you wanted. And because there's never an end in sight, you want to be very mindful of the space that you have. That way you could always have space, and you don't live in clutter, or you don't live in just a mess of your collection. The last thing or alternatively, what I hated was when I ran out of space, everything went directly from purchased in stores into boxes or Rubbermaids to be stored away. If you have to keep it in a box permanently, I don't know. I hate to say it, but it's almost like you don't even need it. You might as well sell it, unless you have a plan in the long run, like I'm trying to give you here. But that's one of the best ways to save space. Another way, again, to save space is, use proper shelving. I am not a big fan of DTOF cabinets. I don't like that they are non-adjustable. There is tricks that you could do to kind of get more space out of them. The old plexiglass cut and tie wraps. I could probably show people some images online of what I'm referring to, but there's ways that you could kind of get extra shelvings out of DTOFs. But I find in general they're big space wasters, and they're really popular because it's cheap glass. It's a good way to keep dust off of stuff. It does a fairly good job of keeping dust off of stuff, despite the fact that it has little cracked holes here and there that you can fill up. And it does the job cheaply. And when they go on special, you can pick them up really cheap too. So they're a go-to for a lot of collectors. Hey, the light penetrates from all angles. Man, a lot of penetration in 12-inch in this one. Anyways, there's a lot of light that penetrates from many angles, so your product looks good in it. but I feel that a lot of times they waste a lot of space. It kills me when I see a person who has a DTOF display. They don't take advantage of making extra shelving, and they just use the original, 1, 2, 3 and the ground as their display, and they put a whole bunch of deluxe transformers in one, and like more than 9 inches to 10 inches of the full 24 inches of space is absolutely wasted. So like try to maximize your space. If you're going to use a DTOF, try to make those extra shelving units that you could stick in, and don't put heavy stuff on those extra shelving units. I've shown images in the past. I did with my Gyro Zetter collection where I had to use a DTOF because I kind of kept it separate from everything. I use my DTOFs usually for video game related merchandise because they're usually taller and it's not too much of a waste of space. But with Transformers, where the general size is that, Deluxe and Voyager that make up 99% of lines, you're always wasting easily 50% to 80% of the shelving space. So never waste that either. If you're going to have a DTOF or you're going to have any kind of stuff, try to maximize the space in between each shelving so you don't have just dead air, just wasting space completely. And I think the last one that I could give, and it's probably the most difficult, but it really is something where if collecting or being a toy collector is a big part of your life, and it's something that you see doing in the foreseeable future nonstop, regardless if you're going to get married or if you're going to, move in with a roommate or something, if it's something that you see in the foreseeable future, whenever you move or whenever you get an apartment, think about the environment that you're moving into and how it's going to accommodate your collection. It's exactly what happened with me. Every house that I looked at when I was looking around to buy my first house, I always looked at it and envisioned, okay, how is this going to work with what I currently own? And how is this going to work with what I'm going to own one day in the future? You don't know what you're going to own, but you are going to own something. And it's something that you have to consider. You have to. You can't just let that pop up on you. You don't want to be that guy on Kijiji that's selling, his pool table because he had a kid and he doesn't have room for it anymore. You want to be someone that's, even if you have a child, even if you get a roommate, you have the space for it, that you could have that roommate and have your collection and whatever the future brings. So there's so many wrinkles to this that are all unique to every individual, and there's no one set answer for every person, but I hope that it might help a little bit because, again, you've only been collecting since 2007, so I'm going to assume around the time of the movie stuff. And a lot of stuff has come out since 2007. I mean, I look to the left at my movie display here, and I mean, if you were anything like me, just of movie toys, that could be some people's entire collections just there. That's easily, man, got to be at least 400 figures, if not more. Maybe more. Not even counting the Masterpiece stuff. That's separate. But and I don't even count Studio Series too. That's a whole other animal too. But either way, like it's a lot. It's a lot. And it does take a lot of space. So again, get rid of that packaging. 99% of packaging isn't worth anything. Movie packaging, trust me, it takes space. I love it. You go to TFCon, and at the end of every day of TFCon, walk by the garbage. Just walk by any garbage can, and it is filled top to bottom with people just cracking open figures and throwing the packaging away because they don't need that space being wasted in their suitcase, let alone when it gets home. So, I mean, packaging really isn't a necessary thing. And yeah, okay, instructions you could deal with. It's small, it's a little flat surface. But even then, now instructions are everywhere on the internet. There's so many good websites for that. Botch the Crab is one example. So many people have like the website scanned online. Excuse me, not the websites, the instructions scanned online. So, I mean, that's another thing too. But there's so many ways I could tackle this. I hope this has been a little helpful. If anyone has anything else they could add, I mean, what I gave was pretty much the key ones that I feel that could really help. After that, I mean, then we're getting more into personal stuff where it's like, well, how do you want to display it? Is there a specific way you want to display it? Is that specific way you're displaying it leading to the issue of space? Do you put them all in car mode instead of robot mode, which I think would be silly, but if you put them all in car mode, that takes a lot of space because 99% of Transformers take more surface area space in alt mode than they do standing up as a robot. So, little advices like that, but those are things that aren't usually too much of a common problem, and I don't really see that as much. And I've seen many people's Transformer collections throughout the years, and all of them have their own unique kind of personality to how they choose to display them, but they all have like their own individual issues. So I hope that helped a little bit. Brett B, again, welcome to being a new person on the Patreon. I hope you have a good time in the craziness that is the Transformer Slag podcast. And again, if you are interested in being a member of the Patreon, much like Brett over here, just be sure to check in the description below under Patreon and check out all the cool stuff we have to add, and come join us on the Discord and complain about how you just don't have too much space for our robots that transform into thingamajiggies.